This guy had a very specific job that he wanted to do. He did it. I'm not sweating. I'm not worried. Like, hey, what's up, y'all? This is Jacob. Welcome back to Sunday Yap Session, the show where every Sunday I hop on here and yap at you all about something with some sort of cohesive storyline to carry us all through, and sometimes we do better than others. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a like because that helps me out quite a bit. And if you want to come yap with me every single Sunday, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I upload at least once a week and sometimes more. Watermelon Red Bull, let's get into it today because I know exactly what I want to talk about. So if you haven't been watching the news over the last week, a handful of days ago at the time I was recording this, the CEO of UnitedHealthcare was killed on his way to a conference. If you haven't heard about this story, I would highly recommend reading into it because this has been very fascinating to read about. But TLDR, there was a gunner who basically sat and waited for him to show up to a conference. He was on his way to a conference and showed up like about an hour before the conference started. The guy very methodically like shot him 2 or 3 times and then basically escaped and has been out in Central Park and no one has been able to figure out where he is. And a lot of the evidence so far is suggesting that this was like very planned, very methodical. This was not just someone who was out to shoot somebody. He seemingly had some level of understanding of his schedule, where he was going to be and when. And he also had like a silencer and stuff on his weapon, was able to clear the jam very quickly. This is someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And my hypothesis at this point is either this was someone that was hired to very specifically kill him, or someone who had like some sort of personal vendetta against UnitedHealthcare and decided to take matters into his own hands. And the response from the media and the response from like regular everyday people on TikTok has been vastly different. If you've been seeing this story and you've been on TikTok, you have probably been seeing all the memes of people like celebrating this guy's death, making like fan cams of the shooter, women like posting on Blue Sky and Twitter that they're like thirsty for the shooter. Everyone is taking this like so casually, and there are not a ton of people that are very concerned about this. And then in the news media, there are a lot of these anchors, hosts, reporters that are reporting on this situation and talking about this as if it's like a very sad, devastating situation, and are responding to a lot of the more like kind of casual or just like straight up comedic response from the internet and talking about it in like a very confused way, as if they're finding these kind of comments disturbing. They're confused as to why people are like basically celebrating this man's death. And then you've seen a response from a lot of these healthcare companies where they are taking all of their CEOs and higher executive staff off of their websites and trying to like obscure these people's identity, and like Wikipedia pages are getting taken down allegedly. Around the same time too, a branch of Blue Cross Blue Shield, I'll put it on the screen because I can't remember exactly which one it is. They had rolled out a policy recently that said that they were going to stop covering anesthesia if it went over like their assessment of how long a surgical operation should take. And then the shooting happened, and then they very quickly rolled that back and said it was because people were misunderstanding the situation. And so it's been a very interesting response to all of this news happening. And I kind of wanted to talk about that today because I think that for these reporters and people that are getting online, stereotypically about anytime someone dies and is like, you should not talk about this in bad taste. Anytime someone dies, it's sad, da 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 da. And I wanted to kind of get into that today. Before we get started, disclaimer for the FBI agent watching my videos and anyone who's about to like get in the comments and take what I'm saying out of context. This is not me advocating for just executions out on the street. I'm not endorsing anything. I'm just talking about it and trying to break this down from a media analysis perspective. I'm just a witness. And I find this very interesting because, at least to me, I think the reason why people are responding either very neutrally or, for a lot of people, very like giddy about this execution that happened basically is very obvious to me. I do not think that anybody is super excited or super happy with their insurance that they have unless you are like super wealthy and you are in a place where these things don't really affect you that much. I don't know anyone who's like, oh, I'm so excited to work with my insurance. I love my insurance provider. Most people's insurance experiences are negative, and especially considering how much these insurance companies are making off of people's healthcare, which, if you are someone like me, believes that all of these healthcare services and things should be free. We should not be paying to like basically deal with things that we have no control over. You largely do not have control over getting sick, having chronic illness, having disabilities, so on and so forth. Like, these are not things that we are like opting into and signing up for. And so it does feel very silly that like these operations, these medications, so on and so forth, are costing exorbitant amounts of money. And then you have people like these CEOs of healthcare companies, of insurance companies, drug manufacturers, so on and so forth, raking in like multi-million or hundreds of millions of dollars in the process. And they're basically basically being a huge, very, very financially lucrative for a small percentage of people industry based off of the healthcare of people living in the United States and other countries. But of course, we're just talking about the United States. And we all know as well that the more capital you have, the better off your like health outcomes are. If you have more money to pay for very expensive private doctors, if you have the money to pay for medications out of pocket, you are largely disconnected and so like shielded from so many of these things that happen in the healthcare industry that are negatively impacting people. And so like, of course, people are not really that shaken up by someone who is making like, I believe his salary was like over $20 million a year. Like, and especially when so many people are having super negative health outcomes, being inconvenienced, or just straight up dying because of healthcare claims being denied by these insurance companies, like, why would anyone care? Like the number of people I saw is like sharing their personal testimonies on TikTok, having a family member whose like medical operation was denied by like UnitedHealthcare specifically, and them dying because of it, or having their medication prescription like not being covered by UnitedHealthcare and having to pay like thousands of dollars a month for medical care and for prescriptions and things like that. Like the financial crippling that people are going through because of insurance companies, because of like the medical industrial complex and how it's like extracting wealth out of everyday Americans. This is an experience that is overall horrible for the average person to deal with. And it doesn't feel great to know that there are people making tons and tons of profit off of your negative health outcomes. And like, if you are someone who is that high of level in these insurance companies and these pharmaceutical companies, you are basically determining directly, I would argue, who lives and who dies in this country. If you are making policies and things like that that are denying people's very valid, very understandable healthcare claims for life-saving surgeries, medications, so on and so forth, you are basically getting to play God in who gets to live, who gets healthcare coverage, who dies, who is getting denied healthcare coverage. And my mutual and like internet sister, Matta Swan, y'all need to go check her out. Love her down. She made a video on TikTok, and I'll include a little clip if I can find it. She basically described him, and I would agree, as a serial killer.
I can go on a whole like 40,000 hour diatribe as to why the American healthcare system is horrible and horrific, how capitalism has no place in health because people can't control when they're fucking sick, and how people like this are the scum of the earth and they're serial killers. Yeah. Clearly what was written on those shelves was a clear dog whistle to those high up in the medical insurance industry. And the subsequent social media response to this, we are in another realm at this point. People are fed up and people are tired of being pushed to their limits. They're tired.
And I think some people are going to take that as like a stretch. I do not think that is a stretch at all. I think if you are someone in that level of power who has this much control over people's healthcare outcomes, and you are implementing systems that are allowing for thousands and thousands and thousands of people to die under your healthcare coverage because you want to make more profits, you want to extract more wealth out of people, you are killing people. And if these people that are doing this have no accountability, no like negative experiences, they're going to make more and more money and are basically like shielded with their wealth and distance from the public space in a lot of ways. If they're not going to deal with any sort of negative outcomes or consequences from that, and if anything, really profit from it and use that money to like lobby the government to basically perpetuate systems that they're doing, like, I'm not shaken up about this. I am not upset about this. I am not sad about this. And I think your everyday average person is not going to be that upset about it. Like, and I think too, the way that this is being covered in the news media is kind of like the way things are being covered when there are like school shooters or just like mass shooters at public events or things like that. There's a lot of like interviews and media clips I'm seeing of people being like, I don't know why people like aren't scared that this killer is like still out there. Like, girl, that killer is not here for me. It is so abundantly obvious. Like I said, go look into the story, but like he wrote like specific messages on the bullets. He sat there and waited, was specifically going for this guy. And like this being treated like some sort of like killer on the loose sort of situation. Like this guy had a very specific job that he wanted to do. He did it. I'm not sweating. I'm not worried. Like, and I think too, I'm seeing a lot of conversations online and like, I get it. Like anytime someone dies, like in hypothetical, it is sad. But like all the stuff I said before, like I am not shaken up and sad about someone who I believe is objectively evil being killed. Like, and I'm just gonna put it like that. The stuff that a lot of these healthcare companies are doing is objectively evil. I think that if you are someone who is in a position of power to change these things and you are complicit in it or are not advocating for change in it, you are evil too. And I've been seeing a lot of people being like, oh, if that was like your family member or if that was you, like you would feel bad and you would be upset that people are like making jokes about your death and things like that. I'm not evil, baby. I am not gonna implement policies that lead to mass death in this country. I am not an evil, wretched person who is pursuing corporate greed and capitalism over the lives of everyday people. I do not feel bad about this because I know that will never be me. And I think that's how like the vast majority of people feel. People are like, oh, he was a father, he was a husband. Like, obviously it is sad. I do feel bad for like his kid. I feel bad for his spouse. Like, it is obviously very devastating to lose somebody. And I don't think anyone is like cheering this on, like, and being like, yeah, I'm so glad that this kid is like fatherless now or whatever. Like, no one is like happy and like giddy about that. But like, and I do think too, a lot of people are like portraying this as sort of like accountability being taken and like a sort of justice in a way. And like, we'll have a whole conversation about vigilante justice some other video. This is not the video for that. Like, that's a whole complex topic. But I think when you are in that level of privilege, you have that much political power, you have that much wealth, you are very shielded from pretty much most types of accountability. You're probably living in spaces with like private security, when you're probably like being able to navigate your life where you are very disconnected from any sort of like interaction with the real world, quote unquote. So many of our government officials are in the pockets of these like healthcare companies, pharmaceutical companies, so on and so forth. There's like the saying that like America is just like a country run by like 50 corporations or whatever. And like I said, I'm not sitting here advocating for this, but like I'm saying, I'm not shaken up by it. We live in a country where people like this can get away with so much and are able to do so many of these things with like no sort of accountability. And so I don't think it's too much of a stretch of the imagination to understand at least where people are coming from when they're like, I think justice was served. That should not be too much of an ideological leap. So it is very funny and like very unserious to me when I'm seeing all these news anchors like having these roundtable discussions being like, I don't understand why people think this way. I don't understand why people are saying all these things, da 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 da. And like, to some degree, I am curious if these are just like talking points that some of them are being given to some extent, because we know a lot of these people that have the same sort of financial wealth and power are like controlling the news media as well. Like, I know like Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, Elon Musk controlling X, which like I know is not like news media traditionally, but like is one of the largest platforms for news and information to be disseminated. It's very, very silly. And it does kind of speak to the way that the media in a lot of ways is starting to get more and more disconnected from the everyday person and the everyday person's experience, and like actually advocating and speaking for the people and covering stories from the perspective of the people, and are more so like portraying stories from like the perspective of corporate interests. And not all journalists, like I come from a journalism background, there are some very incredible, talented, reputable, incredible journalists, many of them in fact, that are covering stories. This is not me being like, all the news media is evil, all journalists are like shills, blah, 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 blah. But like, it is very apparent. And I think especially too in a country that is becoming more and more hyper-capitalist, the news media in a lot of ways is trying to chase the dollar. And like, you see that in kind of the degradation of news and like clickbait journalism and sensationalist headlines to get you to read things and share news stories without even reading them. And like, you go and read a news story and there are like 50 ads in it. Things are not looking too great. Things are not looking too great. But yeah, that's pretty much the video today. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because it's been very fascinating kind of seeing the public response to all of this and just seeing how this is all sort of played out. This all is very, very interesting, and I am so fascinated to see where this all goes. But yeah, thanks for watching today's video. I know this was a little bit different, but hope you all enjoyed it. Like I said, if you enjoyed this, give it a like. That helps me out quite a bit. And if you want to come yap with me every single week, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I upload at least once a week. Hope you all are doing well. Hope you stay safe. Hope your insurance companies are not playing with you. And I will catch you on the next episode. See ya.